Before we begin, in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining children under the age of 13, violating the Child's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies meant to dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. This video is not made for kids. It is not targeted at kids. It is not advertising to kids. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Once again, it is time to look at Doctor Who Series 12. Today, we will be reviewing Episode 5, Fugitive of the Judoon, co-written by Vinay Patel and Chris Chibnall. As always, I will be talking about spoilers, especially with this episode, so be advised that if you have not seen Fugitive of the Judoon yet, this is your only chance to abandon ship. And I'll start by saying, right off the bat, I was excited for this episode. Not because the Judoon were coming back. I don't have strong feelings for the Judoon, you know? They're mercenary space police. They are solely dedicated to their duty, whatever it is. They are very trigger happy, and they are also idiots. The Judoon are a fusion of the Ogrons and the Centaurans, with a rhino head. No, I was looking forward to this because this episode is written, or co-written, by Vinay Patel. Vinay Patel also wrote Demons of the Punjab, my favorite episode of Series 11. Because Resolution is a holiday special, and as I've said, holiday specials don't count. But anyway, yeah, so right off the bat, knowing that this was the episode Vinay Patel wrote, I was really looking forward to it. And only about half of this video, maybe a little over a third of it, is going to be the review. And then the rest of it will be me talking about some of the theories surrounding what happened and where I personally believe what happened. But anyway, so this episode opens in Gloucester with a woman named Ruth. And I'm going to get back to Ruth because I do have some thoughts on her. And then, you know, as it stands, Gloucester is besieged and isolated by the Judoon. And first of all, the Judoon, or the only one we really see, the commander, because the rest are wearing their helmets, the Judoon look amazing. Like, it looks really good. Like, I don't remember the previous episodes with the Judoon in them, but just the way this Judoon moved, it looks really fluid, it flows nicely, and his mouth is really dynamic. Like, the animatronic for his mouth. Like, the lips had all these twitches to them and all these very fluid movements. Like, it wasn't just how, you know, animatronics normally move with the... There was a lot of dynamic movements, and it made the Judoon look really good. And then, of course, realizing that the Judoon are, you know, on the attack, the Doctor shows up and tries to stop them. And Jodie Whittaker, once again, is phenomenal. I think at this point, yeah, she has replaced Peter Capaldi as my favorite Doctor of New Who, which, in my ranking, makes her my third favorite Doctor overall. You know, because the way we open, the companions are, once again, asking about what's going on with the Doctor, and, you know, when she leaves, where is she going? And the Doctor explains, I'm looking for the Master. I constantly go back to Gallifrey, and now that I think about it, a lot of people are comparing her to Sylvester McCoy, which I think is apt, but really, I think her characterization, you know, aside from Tom Baker, which I will always stand by, is a lot closer to Paul McGann, you know, because after the movie, in the expanded universe, the audios and such, and with the outset of the Time War, the Eighth Doctor's arc is very much a happy-go-lucky, fun-loving adventurer who just wants to have fun. He wants to have a good time, but it always seems like the universe is determined to beat him down. And that is exactly the kind of arc the 13th Doctor is going on. And here, really, we keep seeing what happened to Gallifrey affect her. We keep seeing her cracking, and, you know, and a lot of what's going on with the Judoon at least initially, until the episode goes on, we see that it's almost a distraction for her. And, so much of this episode focuses on Jodie Whittaker, and she is just phenomenal. As I said, as the companions, they don't get a lot to do. Because the Judoon are mercenary space cops, Yaz gets a little bit at the beginning, but then she's pulled out of the story. And normally I'd have a problem with that, but this time around, I'm okay with it, because this is a very doctor-centric, heavily doctor-focused episode, so it makes sense for the companions not to have a lot to do. And also, I don't have an issue with it because their plot line in this episode, as small as it is, sets up what I think a future plot line is going to be. What the series is building up to. Also, spoiler alert, Captain Jack is back. Oh, and John Barrowman is just so magnetic. Actually, because like Jodie Whittaker is also really magnetic. I was hoping they would get some screen time together, but that didn't happen. And like I said, Jack pulled the companions out to warn him, to try and warn the Doctor of a future plot. Beware the lone Cyberman. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that because, again, we don't know what's happening here. But my prediction is that lone Cyberman plotline, that's going to be the finale. But yeah, so, because, and here's the thing, like I said, because this is very Doctor-centric, the companions are pulled out of the plot, and Jack is the reason why. And like I said, it's okay because it's setting up for future stuff, but at the same time, it's really clunky compared with the rest of the episode. Like, there had to be a much more fluid way you could have done this. But that's nitpicking. So between the companions and Jack, a lot of this episode focuses on the Doctor. And we learn that this woman, Ruth, played by Jo Martin, yeah, that's her name. It turns out she is the fugitive the Judoon are looking for, and yet she doesn't know why. She has no recollection of who she is. As the Judoon state, there's a bioshield on her. And obviously the Doctor investigates, and again, spoilers now, last chance, abandoned ship. Actually, first of all, this episode is really well paced, it's, every time I go to skip through the commercials, I went like, wow, it's been 20 minutes? That felt like nothing. And not like, what's a good episode? And not briskly paced like the way Orphan 55 was, where it's so very rushed. This was a breakneck, high-octane plot, and I love stories like that, episodes, movies like that, where all this exciting, amazing stuff happens and it feels like no time's passed. It's very enjoyable. So anyway, the Doctor and Ruth make their way to Ruth's childhood home, and then we learn what's going on. Actually, first of all, I want to make a really quick comment. It's such a small thing, but every time Jodie uses the sonic, she's used this really exaggerated motion, and here she didn't, it was just point. And, it's a small touch, because as much as I love the 13th Doctor, I do think the constant with the sonic was really getting annoying, and just her pointing worked well enough. And finally, the twist. It turns out that a TARDIS is buried at Ruth's childhood home. Not just a TARDIS, a blue police box. And the reason Ruth didn't know who she was, and the reason there was a bioshield around her, was because she activated a chameleon arch. Turns out, Ruth is the Doctor. An incarnation the 13th Doctor has no knowledge of. And yet, it's very obviously from her past, because to the Doctor, Gallifrey still exists, even though the 13th Doctor knows Gallifrey was destroyed. And that is one thing I will say about Jo Martin here. Her performance, you know, her performance as Ruth was fine, but her performance as the Doctor is very by the book. It's very color by numbers because it feels very unsure. Wherever this plotline is going, it feels like Jo Martin only got this one script. So she has no idea who this character is, and it does come across in her performance. And then the two doctors. Also, I really like the confrontational interaction between these doctors, because every time the doctors meet, they don't get along, And it's only through the circumstances of the adventure that they are forced to get along. Another reason I don't like Day of the Doctor. Tennant and Smith got along way too easily. But yeah, I'm eager to see where this plotline goes off, because this episode ends, after the Doctors part way, with the 13th Doctor heading off for the events of the next episode, Praxeus. And, people are I really want to... I'm trying to put that in there, but I'm trying to figure out where to put it in. I guess I'll do it before I start talking about my own feelings on it. Yeah, Fugitive of the Judoon was just really good. Most of my problems with it boil down to nitpicks. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10, but that's a very uneasy 9, because the way this episode ends, with them just going into Praxeus, again, next week's episode, it feels like this story is multiple parts. So, and obviously this episode is all build-up to a payoff we'll get later. So, it's why I didn't rate Spyfall Part 1 and then rate Spyfall Part 2. I just rated Spyfall. But yeah, as of right now, I'm giving Fugitive of the Judoon a 9 out of 10, because it was just one of the most enjoyable episodes I've watched this far. And now, on to more of the Ruth Doctor. Like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the popular theories circulating around here, and sort of what I think is going on. First of all, there is the most popular theory, based on a rumor that started circulating before Series 12 aired, is that she is an incarnation that existed before the first Doctor. Which people are pointing out makes no sense, because the first Doctor's chameleon circuit broke in An Unearthly Child. It wasn't until An Unearthly Child that the TARDIS became a police box. But also, the Ruth Doctor has no knowledge of the sonic screwdriver, an element that came into play during the second Doctor's run. So clearly, it has to come, she either has to be before Hartnell, or she has to come between the first and second Doctors, both of which... I don't like the whole secret regeneration thing, because it throws off the count. Again, because of the War Doctor. But more so, again, because of the War Doctor, we just had this twist. I don't really think we need to do it again. But also, there are other theories circulating around, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit. The most straightforward one being Ruth is an And this is one thing I like. I like that Chibnall is paying sort of service to the expanded universe outside of the show. Like, I think in Series 11, he made a Loom reference, which I'll get back to. But, yeah, no. The most popular theory I've seen is that Ruth is an unbound Doctor. A Doctor from an alternate universe. This is just for example, not this particular Doctor, because this Doctor is dead. But yeah, that's the popular one, and I think that would be the safest one, and I'd be content with it. The other one, again, going back to pre-Hartnell, is that Ruth is the other, which I'm going to break down this theory for you right now. As you know, if you're a Doctor Who fan, as you know, there are two key figures in the founding of Time Lord Society. There is Omega and Rassilon. But there isn't. There is a third one who is only ever referred to as the Other. Now, originally, Gallifrey was ruled by the Witches of Karn. Sort of, I'm calling them Gallifreyans. It's a little more complicated than that, but, sort of a cult of witches who study magic, whereas the Time Lord studied science. And Rassilon led a rebellion against the Witches of Karn. He overthrew them. And so that, science and logic and reason could prevail. And that was really the start of Time Lord society. In retaliation, though, the Witches of Karn, if you aren't familiar with them, made a few appearances in the series. Their first appearance was a Tom Baker story, The Brain of Morbius. And then they had a major role in the short The Night of the Doctor, where Paul McGann's 8th Doctor regenerates into the War Doctor. And then they cameoed in the Series 9 opener, The Magician's Apprentice. And they were the tertiary antagonists in the Series 9 finale, Hellbent. Why tertiary? Because the primary antagonist was Rassilon, and the secondary antagonist was the Doctor. Hellbent is a terrible episode. Anyway, I got way off topic there. Anyway, after Rassilon overthrew the Witches of Karn, they punished Gallifrey with a curse that caused sterilization. The logic being that if we can't rule you, you have condemned yourself to extinction. But the Time Lords found a way around this. They created looms, like for knitting or making a scarf or such. And they would take samples of genetic material, DNA, and combine them and weave them through the loom and make a new person. That is how the Time Lords reproduce. That is how they continue on. And yes, looms are canon. Now, what happened is after Omega died, opening the Eye of Harmony, the third key figure in the founding of Time Lord Society, was worried that Rassilon, in his power trip, would go after him next. So to hide himself, the other threw himself into the looms, coming out weaved as a new being. The Doctor. Now, as I've said, I don't think I've said, but I hate the other theory. It ties in because it makes the Doctor too big, too important in the universe. The major reason Tennant and Smith are my least favorite Doctors. So if it's the other, if Ruth is the other, I could accept it. I wouldn't be happy, but I could accept it. Now, the third theory is that she is Season 6B. And this one is also going to need some explanation, even though I've talked about it before. Where is it? Here we go. Alright, so the theory behind this one is Season 6... Excuse me again. Is Patrick Troughton's final season, the Second Doctor's final season, where he regenerates in the War Games. Did you see that? There's a bit of a glare. Now, Patrick Troughton's regeneration into the Third Doctor is it is the most unique regeneration in the entire series for two reasons. One, it's never seen on screen. Even John Hurt's regeneration into the Ninth Doctor is somewhat seen, but Patrick Troughton's is never seen. He starts regenerating at the end of the War Games, and in the beginning of Spearhead from Space, he comes out the Third Doctor. And the reason for that is the second reason why Patrick Troughton's is the most unique regeneration. Because he is the only Doctor to regenerate before his successor was cast. Before Patrick Troughton regenerated, John Pertwee had not been cast yet. And that's all well and good, and people thought nothing of it. Until 21 years later, when we got a little story called The Two Doctors. And the reason this story called everything into question, there were several reasons this story called everything into question, because there are things that just don't add up. The most obvious being this story came out 21 years later than the War Games. Patrick Troughton is obviously older. even by the standards of the 5 Doctors, which I think was only a year before that. But, that one could be explained away. Patrick Troughton just got older. But then he says things but then he says and does things. Like, he has a TARDIS recall device, a remote control that can summon the TARDIS to him wherever he is, even though the Doctor never had one. Similarly, the way the 2 Doctors opens, the second Doctor is saying he's on a mission for the Time Lords. But wait, during the second Doctor era, he was on the run from the Time Lords. He didn't come into contact again with them until his final story. The theory of Season 6B is that at the moment of his regeneration, the second Doctor was pulled out of time by the Celestial Intervention Agency, the Time Lords Black Ops, to do a series of missions for them so that the Time Lords could have plausible deniability. And then when they were done, they put the second Doctor back in time where he finished his regeneration and began his exile on Earth. Now, Season 6B is the theory I believe. I believe that this is where Ruth comes from. She is what happened during Season 6B, especially given her actions. The way she fought off the Judoon and disgraced the commander, and what she did to the clients who hired the Judoon Gat. Because if she was on a mission if she was working for the Celestial Intervention Agency, these would be the skills she used. And also, I do think that at some point, while she was on this mission, the Time Lords would partially regenerate the second Doctor into a placeholder, if you will. This also wouldn't be because that would acknowledge a fan film. Which Doctor Who has done in the past, like the Brigadier's daughter, Kate Lethbridge Stewart, she came from a fan film, and now she's canon. Similar thing happened here, although this fan film, whose name I am forgetting right now, it was unfinished. It never got finished, and I believe as of right now, it's still unfinished, where, the same thing happened. The second Doctor was pulled from time during his regeneration, and the CIA, the Celestial Intervention Agency, forced a partial regeneration on him. And then this Doctor went on missions for them, and once they were over, he met his future self, Jon Pertwee, before regenerating into him. And actually, fun fact, that fan film, Jon Pertwee was in it, by the way. It was like the final thing he did before he died, I believe. And his lines in that movie, if you're a big Finnish fan, his lines in that fan film were used in Zagreus. But that's personally what I believe. The Ruth Doctor comes from Season 6B, and she is a placeholder regeneration, a partial regeneration meant to be on a mission for the CIA, meant to be an agent for the CIA until they don't need her anymore. But all of these are just my thoughts. What are yours? Remember to start a conversation in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video around to help my channel grow. In the description box below, you will find the link to my Ko-fi, where you can help support the channel, and you'll find the link to my Twitter, where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is the Sentinel, watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.